When I think of 1950s Hollywood, it's all about glamorous red carpets, flashing cameras, and movie stars who looked like they were carved out of stardust. Everything about that era seemed magical, perfect even. But the more I started digging into that golden age, the more I realized there was something darker hiding underneath all that shine. That's when I found him, Johnny Roselli. He wasn't an actor, he didn't direct films, but somehow, he still controlled the stage. From behind the scenes, quietly, and with dangerous precision. Johnny was a real-life mob boss sent to Hollywood by the infamous Chicago outfit, one of the most powerful mafia families in America. But instead of showing up with guns or threats, he showed up with a slick suit, a killer smile, and a plan that no one saw coming. He didn't need to fight, for Hollywood was struggling with labor strikes and union problems, and Johnny, he offered solutions. And in return, he got power, real power, over studios, sets, contracts, even who got hired and who didn't. And all of it happened quietly. No headlines, no scandals, just smooth influence, just pulling the strings like it was his personal stage. Before Johnny became Hollywood's secret puppet master, he was just a kid named Filippo Sacco, born in Italy and raised in Chicago. He didn't grow up with silver screens or red carpets. He grew up with crime, survival, and ambition burning in his chest. He changed his name to Johnny Roselli to sound more American, more polished, more forgettable even. But there was nothing forgettable about the way he moved. He had this way of blending in and standing out at the same time, like someone who knew a secret you didn't, but would never tell. He quickly climbed the ranks of the Chicago outfit, a powerful branch of the American Mafia, and while others were busy making noise, Johnny was studying people, listening, waiting. That's why the bosses trusted him. He wasn't reckless, he was strategic. By the time the 1940s rolled into the 1950s, the mob had their eyes on a new kind of gold mine, Hollywood. And for a man like Roselli, that wasn't just tempting, it was destiny. And the studios? Vulnerable, labor strikes, union disputes, backroom drama. It was the perfect time for someone like Johnny to slip in and take control. And so, the outfit sent him west, not with a hit list, but with a mission. Blend in, get close, get control. And he did. He started making quiet connections with producers, studio executives. He made problems disappear. And just like that, he wasn't just in Hollywood, he owned a piece of it. By the time Johnny Roselli was fully settled in, Hollywood wasn't just a playground, it was his stage. Coming off the influence he built through the labor unions, Johnny didn't just stop at pulling strings behind the curtain. He started living like a king in the kingdom he quietly conquered. I'm talking about cozy dinners with Edgar Rice Burroughs, yeah, the guy who created Tarzan, getting close with Columbia Pictures boss Harry Cohn, and even with the original blonde bombshell herself, Jean Harlow. This man wasn't just connected, he was the connection. And it was that tight bond with Cohn that gave him real pull inside the movie business, long before the rest of the world knew what was happening. With Cohn on his side and the Chicago mob at his back, Johnny wasn't just hanging around sets, he was working a full takeover plan, a silent, smooth one. Their method wasn't new, it had already worked in other industries like steel and trucking. The strategy? Grab hold of the Hollywood labor unions, put pressure on the bosses, and bleed the studios dry until they coughed up everything. Power, money, control, all of it. And they didn't do it alone. Johnny teamed up with Willie Beoff, a brutal enforcer from Chicago. Through him, they managed to buy out George Brown, the head of IATSE, the union that represented almost everyone behind the scenes in film, TV, and theater. Suddenly, the mob didn't just influence production, they owned it. And if the studios refused to pay, no cameras rolling, no movies releasing, no box office money coming in, that fear alone was enough to make studios like MGM, Warner Bros., and Columbia quietly hand over millions just to keep the machine running. And the wildest part? The studio heads, people like Cohn and Jack Warner, weren't even trying to fight it. They were terrified, yeah, but also a little obsessed with the mob's polished glamour. They saw these men, dressed in expensive suits, gold watches flashing in the sun, and they admired the very power that threatened to destroy them. It reminded me of The Irishman, that one scene where De Niro gets the diamond-studded ring from the boss, a symbol that means loyalty, silence, and power. Cohn and Warner wore rings like that too. They belonged, and once you belonged to them, you didn't get to say no. Johnny's influence grew even stronger when he pulled Abner Zwillman into the picture, a major mobster in Jersey who was tight with Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky. So when Cohn needed fast cash to buy out his dying business partner, Johnny pointed him straight to Zwillman. The deal went down. Columbia changed hands, and in return, the mob got a silent slice of the studio. No paperwork, no credit, but complete control. Zwillman kept that hold until he was found mysteriously hanging in 1959. Another secret, buried deep in Tinseltown's velvet grave. But Johnny didn't hide his success. He flaunted it. Fast cars, tailored suits, money flowing like champagne. But that kind of flash, it draws attention. And soon, the media and the cops started sniffing around. The truth finally cracked open thanks to a journalist named Westbrook Pegler, a ruthless, union-hating reporter who exposed the whole thing. And suddenly, the mob's secret grip on Hollywood wasn't a secret anymore. In 1942, Johnny got called up to the army. But just 3 months in, he was arrested for extortion and racketeering hearing. Dragged into court alongside big names like Frank Nitti, Bioff, Brown, and even future outfit boss Paul Ricca, the trial was explosive. Bioff turned into a rat. Nitti couldn't handle the idea of another prison sentence. He took his own life. And Bioff, let's just say snitches don't retire quietly. He was blown up in his car years later. At the end of the trail, Johnny was sentenced to 10 years, but he didn't serve 10, just under 4, and then he was back out, quiet, stylish, and hungry for the spotlight again. He found work through an old friend at Eagle Lion Films, a smaller B-movie studio. Officially, he was listed as an associate producer, but you won't see his name on the credits. Behind the curtain, though, he was helping craft gritty noir films, still whispering his ideas from the shadows while the stars soaked up the light. Even after prison, Johnny couldn't stay away from Hollywood. But this wasn't just about fame or charm. After the extortion trial splashed his name next to America's most dangerous gangsters, the FBI was watching hard. If they found even a crack, he'd be back behind bars. So he played the game. A producer on paper. But in reality, he was laundering legitimacy. Roselli backed some of the most hard-boiled crime films of the late 40s. T-Men, Raw Deal, and He Walked by Night, starring a haunting Richard Basehart as a PTSD-ridden veteran turned criminal. These films were raw, harsh, and way too close to reality. Unsurprisingly, they turned a rare profit, especially for Eagle Lion Studio, bleeding cash from everywhere. He and producer Brian Foy had found a winning formula. Low-budget gangster films that didn't shy away from the dirt. But Eagle Lion was broken and beyond saving. By the end of 1948, the studio collapsed. Roselli's Hollywood chapter was over, but the town had already made its mark. The money, the women, the fame, he'd tasted it all. Still, when the lights dimmed in LA, he didn't vanish. He shifted coasts. In the years that followed, Roselli resurfaced, this time as a producer for Monogram Pictures. At least, that was the official title. In reality, he was Chicago's man in Las Vegas, managing the mob's casino, and then things got darker. After the Cuban Revolution shut down mob operations in Havana, Roselli, along with Sam Giancana and Santo Trafficante, was tapped to help take out Fidel Castro, CIA-sanctioned, full cloak and dagger. Around the same time, his name also surfaced in whispers tied to JFK's assassination. Ironic, considering the mob had allegedly helped Kennedy win the 1960 election, only to be betrayed once he got into office. Roselli lived longer than most in his world, but it didn't end quietly. In 1975, he testified before a Senate committee investigating CIA plots against Castro and the death of the president. His old boss, Giancana, had already been murdered the year before, right before his own testimony. Roselli appeared 3 times. The 4th never happened. A few weeks later, the body of Johnny Roselli was found stuffed inside a 55-gallon oil drum floating off the coast of Miami. Hollywood gave him everything, and still, he died far from its golden glow. And that's the story of Johnny Roselli, the man who stepped into Hollywood not to perform, but to control. He played the role of a lifetime, until the lights went out for good. If you love this dive into fame, crime, and the shadows in between, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Drop a comment too. Tell us who else you want exposed from behind the curtain. Because in Hollywood, the spotlight may shine bright, but the shadows always tell the truth.